back to my channel. This is Heaven with Heaven's Audventure, and this is such an exciting video. So I just paid off all my student loans, which is so exciting. It's also just shocking. Like I can't believe it. So this whole video is going to be talking about how I was able to pay off my student loans, what I had learned along the way, also just giving you guys some information about student loans, things that I've learned, things that I researched, just the whole topic on student loans. I just wanted to do a video to hopefully help some of you guys out there. So for context, I will only be talking about federal student loans. I did not borrow any private loans. You can borrow from like your bank or credit union, your great Aunt Sally, anyone who's willing to loan you money you can borrow from, but I only borrowed from the federal government. And if you're new here and you have no idea who I am, I'm 27 years old, my name's Heaven, I live in Tennessee. I'm a full-time accountant, CPA, certified public accountant, and I've been in my career now for almost 5 years, which is crazy. Life is flying by. And I graduated of May of 2017, so 5 years ago last month. And I also had to go back to school after I graduated to get 15 additional credit hours to sit for my CPA exam, and that cost about $2,000, but luckily because of my internship, my senior year, I had made a lot of money from my internship, so I ended up just paying cash for that last semester. So that whole last 15 credit hours I took at community college is not included in my loans because I was blessed to be able to pay for it financially on my own. A little more background about my financial situation. I do live by myself. I'm renting. I live in Tennessee, so it's not a super expensive state, but I'm pretty much a frugal person. I would say I'm very financially sound. I feel like I make good financial decisions for the most part. It feels like I'm tooting my own horn, but it's just to give you guys some sort of context of where I'm coming from. I also came from a middle-class family. My parents have come a long way since they had us at a very young age, and so they have learned a lot of financial lessons in their journey and their marriage that they have poured into my sister and I'm so grateful for that because they learned a lot of things the hard way. Neither one of them are finance people, but my dad, I'm a CPA and I still ask my dad tax questions. Like he has just figured out the world, and I'm impressed by it because he's an electrician, but he's very smart. He's learned a lot along the way. So I'm very blessed with that because I was taught about compound interest and credit scores and credit cards and all these things that I realized in college that my peers had no idea how this stuff worked. Things that dad had like lectured us for years and years, and I'm thankful for now. So all that to say, welcome aboard. I'm glad you guys are here, and I'm hoping that you can learn something from this video. So I'm gonna be very transparent and share with you guys exactly how much I borrowed and when and what payments I made. So let's jump on over to my spreadsheet. So you'll see here that I borrowed a total of $27,000 for my 4 years at university, and I did go to a private Christian university. I didn't do the public school thing, and I didn't do the community college route. So it was a more expensive school, but I also had really great grades and almost a 4.0 GPA. So I had partial scholarships the whole time I was there. I also had up to like 3 jobs at a time. Like I worked a lot of small jobs the whole time I was in school. So all of my loans went directly for my tuition, my room and board, and then I moved off campus and I didn't do a meal plan for the last couple of years. So I tried to keep my expenses as low as possible so I didn't have to borrow as much as you would think like a normal college expense would be. So I borrowed a total of $27,000 over those 4 years, and I ended up paying $30,402 over the last 5 years. The difference being the interest I'd accrued over time. And I lucked out because since the federal government has paused the student loan accrual since March of 2020, all this past 2 years there's been no compound interest accruing. So I've been making my payments on principal, which is just amazing. And I don't think the interest is going to start accruing until September. However, the big elephant in the room here is if the Biden administration forgives everybody's student loans and I just made all these sacrifices and all these payments to pay off my student loans, I'm proud that I paid off my own student loans that I borrowed. So it will be okay, but that could very well happen, and that's why a lot of people are holding off and making any payments, and rightfully so. I don't blame you. So you'll see that I borrowed 7 different student loans in the 4 years that I was in school. So you have unsubsidized loans and subsidized loans. So the biggest difference, and this was a big question I had gotten, is if you borrow a subsidized loan, it is subsidized by the federal government, meaning that when you borrow, the whole time you're in school, the government is paying the interest that's accruing. So it's still accruing interest, but you're not having to pay it. The taxpayers are paying it for you. So the interest doesn't start accruing on a subsidized loan until 6 months after you graduate. That's like your grace period, which is really great because it gives you time to get a job and to get your fees settled, and you can start making your student loan payments. An unsubsidized loan starts accruing interest the day that you borrow. So let's say you borrow money your freshman year, as I did here. You'll see I borrowed $5,500 my freshman year. That interest started accruing in 2013, and I didn't make my first payment until 2018. So that's several years that it's accruing interest daily, compounding, before before I'm even making my first payment. So as you can see, subsidized loans are very much more beneficial. However, there are income limits with it. If you're borrowing under your parents and they make too much money, then they won't be allowed to get a subsidized loan. I also think there's caps to it. I think it's like a $30,000 limit. So if you go to a really expensive school, you can only have up to $30,000 subsidized. And if you're a graduate student, I think the limit's like $130,000, so it's a whole lot more. But just know there's limits with subsidized, but it is definitely preferable. So go for the subsidized loan first before unsubsidized. And the limits that you're allowed to borrow is determined through filling out the FAFSA that every single student has to fill out every single year. And that's the free application of federal student aid, I think. It's such an annoying thing to fill out, but that's what determines how much aid you're allowed to have. So you'll see here I have my interest rates. These are annual rates, but student loans are compounded daily. Fun fact. And then anytime you borrow any money, there's going to be fees for processing it. So they'll just net that out of how much they give you. So even though I borrowed $5,500, I didn't actually get $5,500. I got $5,444. This all adds up to me actually borrowing a net amount of $26,720 over the 4 years that I borrowed money. These are all the payments that I made over the last 5 years. So over the course of 2018, I ended up paying $6,600 in total for my student loans. 2019, I paid just under $6,000. So then in 2020, I paid a little over $7,000. And in 2021, I didn't make many payments because they were seriously talking about forgiving our student loans, and I didn't want to be an idiot and make these big payments. So I ended up making a big payment at the end of last year when I just determined for myself that they're not going to end up forgiving our loans. We'll see. And then this year in 2022, I made a couple really big payments within a month period, but that was only because I was so close to the finish line. I was like, I'm just going to borrow money from my savings and pay these off so I can celebrate. So that's exactly what I did. So I ended up paying a total of $30,402. So when you're paying off your student loans, there are several different payment plans that you can enroll in. There is an income-driven repayment plan, and I think that's basically just taking 10% of your income, and then that's going to be your student loan payment each month. There's a graduated plan, and that's what I initially enrolled in, and that means that each year your student loan payment is going to go up because it's assuming that you're going to get a pay raise or a promotion and you're going to have more income. And I thought in my head, like, oh, that makes sense, and I'm able to pay more. What I wasn't thinking was as you get more money, you're also having more expenses because we live in America and we buy more things. So really the income to expense ratio, I feel like, was greater when I first started my career than it is now, just because of how much more I'm paying for now than I was 5 years ago when I had roommates from Craigslist. It's kind of a funny thing to think back to. And I will mention, you can go to this website called studentloanhero.com. I was reading that the whole time I was preparing for this video, and it is very sound advice, like very thorough with explaining all the different terms. So I would definitely recommend going to that website. It seems very helpful. A big important thing to note when you're making an actual payment, when you log into your thing and you're like deciding what payment to make, if you're paying extra more than your required amount for that month, make sure that that payment is hitting principal on your loans and not necessarily going to the next month's payment. So it'll ask you, let's say your student loan is $300 for that month and you're paying $500. So it'll ask you if you want this $200 extra to go to next month's, which means next month you'll only be paying $100. I would recommend not doing that because then you're going to get lazy and not paying more this time. You're not going to end up paying anything extra, but instead putting that $200 extra to the principal of your loan so you can chip away at it while the interest is compounding. That way over time you have less to owe than if you kept paying the months ahead of time. You're really hitting interest a lot of the time, which isn't knocking down your principal at all. I hope that made sense. Some keywords with student loans. If you are in default, that means that you have not been making your student loans. If you go 9 months without making a payment, then you are automatically in default, which is not good. If you're in default for too long, they will start taking money out of your income. So literally from your paycheck, from your employer, you're going to be getting less money. Now, if you're in any kind of economic hardship or you lost your job, you went through a divorce, all kinds of huge financial things that happen in life, you can definitely have things resituated. You just have to explain your situation. You'll probably have to provide documentation for them to grant you any kind of grace for that. If your student loans are deferred, that means that you're not having to pay them yet. So after you graduate, you have 6 months of a grace period for subsidized loans. So that would be deferred. So that's what that keyword, your student loans are deferred until 6 months after you graduate. Right now, we're in the COVID interest deferral. So for 2 years now, we've not been accruing interest. It's been deferred from the federal government, which has been so nice. Forbearance is more temporary temporary. Let's say you're going through a divorce, so something really big, sudden, that's going to affect your finances, at least temporarily until you can get your footing back. Then you can apply for student loan forbearance, and it'll basically pause your student loans and an interest accrual on some loans, but not all of them. It'll still be accruing interest on some of them. But you can do that up to 12 months, I believe. So that's only if you're going through something really serious. That can't just be, oh, I'm getting behind in life, I just bought a new Mercedes and I can't afford my student loans. That's not gonna work. So some strategies I had while paying off my student loans was the highest interest rates are accruing the most interest, so I wanted those paid off first. But before that, I wanted my unsubsidized loans to be paid off first because they had the biggest snowballing interest effect. So I wanted to pay those off and get those chipped off first before paying the subsidized loans, which were smaller in interest and additional money. Get the principal down on your loans as quick as you can. Also, several people like to consolidate their student loans, and maybe when you log into your profile, it'll ask you if you want to consolidate. And I almost fell for this once and I almost consolidated. Everyone's financial situation is different, so it may work for you. But for me and mentally, I liked having several different loans so that it felt attainable. Like I was borrowing a $5,000 here, $2,000 here, a $3,000 here. So as I paid them off, they disappeared and I only had like 4 loans left and then 3 loans left. And it felt like I was making progress. If I would have consolidated all these and literally had $30,000 to pay off, I don't feel like I would have been as motivated to pay them off because it would be such a large amount and I would feel like I'm not making any progress. That's me personally. Also, if you consolidate your loans, you're going to be losing any grace period that you have with specific loans. So if you have your subsidized loans and your unsubsidized loans and you consolidate them together, you're going to lose out on that 6 months that your subsidized loans aren't accruing interest. Because you've compiled them all together, they're going to be accruing interest together because it's one loan now. I would recommend talking to a financial advisor or to your loan officer, to your lender, if you are seriously considering consolidating. If you have a lot of loans, like I have friends who've borrowed over $100,000 in loans and they're just kind of lost, they don't really know what to do. I would highly recommend talking to someone who does this every day for their job because they know the quickest route and they know some shortcuts for you. So to give you guys a visual of the difference between compound interest versus simple interest, I created this chart showing an example of if you borrowed at $10,000, and I just used 4% as an even number. The simple interest would mean that you're only paying the 4% times the 10,000, which is $400 each year. So you're just having to pay $400 more each year up until year 10, and then you're paying $4,000 extra in 10 years by the time you pay off that loan. However, with student loans, each year, the next year compounds over the previous year's balance, which now turns into principal. So it's not just adding $400 each year, it's taking the 4% times your current balance, which is already accrued from interest in the past. So by the end of 10 years, if you borrow $10,000 at 4%, then you owe about $4,800 in interest, whereas simple interest would only be $4,000. So about $800 difference within 10 years with this example. And if we did this over like 100 years, it would go straight up. It would turn into an exponential graph, if you guys know what that looks like, over time, to where it just literally snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. So like I mentioned earlier, I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any good questions about the student loans that I can mention in this video, and I got a couple of really good questions. I also got several questions about international students and people who borrow internationally. I am no help whatsoever in that department. I have no idea how that works. That is all foreign to me. No pun intended, so I can't help you with that. I apologize. Hopefully you can do some research online and find the answers that you need. So this one person said, not a question, but maybe mention how to avoid student loans at all costs. I'm sure you have that written down. Yes, that should be the whole start of this video. If you can at any way not borrow money, by all means, do not do it. Do not be enticed by this. You're paying so much more money in interest and it's awful. But for a lot of us who this is the only way to get an education is to be borrowing money, this is how it has to be done. So just try and be smart when you're paying them off. So I forgot to mention a very important thing in this context of student loans, and that is scholarships and grants. If you can get a scholarship to go to school, you do not have to pay that back. So like my college had a whole entire list of all their scholarships that are offered. You just have to apply for them to see if you qualify. It does require some work. I had to write a lot of essays, but I got several $1,000s in scholarships, which was so nice because you do not have to pay that back. Same for any be federal or state grants. That is from the government. If you're an international student from another country, if you're diverse, if you have a unique ethnicity, there's all kinds of random things that you'll get government grants for, and you do not have to pay those back. So definitely ask your financial aid office about the different grants that are offered at your school. Same for scholarships. That's free money you don't have to pay back. So do that before you even think about getting loans. I will say I had several peers in college that borrowed like too much money. Like they would get like, I don't know, $10,000 a semester, and then they would use that extra money to go shopping or get their groceries or go out, which was fine then. But if you're using your loans to buy like a $4 gallon of milk at the store, by the time you pay off those loans, you have paid over like 80 bucks for that gallon of milk. Like when you think about it in the long run, do not use the loans for anything unless you absolutely have to. Like absolutely have to. Kendall always asks good questions. He said, what was your goal when you first started? How did it change over time? So when I graduated, I did make the goal to pay off my student loans in 5 years. However, when I took my job with the state government doesn't make as much money as like public accounting or other industry work. So I kind of put that goal in the back of my head because I was like, I have a great work-life balance where I work, but I don't make a ton of money. So we're not gonna be able to pay them off in 5 years. And then as I was in my job, I realized how stable the Tennessee state government is and how well we're paid, which is fantastic. We're one of the highest paid state governments in the entire nation, and we're one of the leading states financially in the whole nation, which who knew? Just me growing up in Tennessee, I had no idea. So it benefited me that I have a great job that I love working for the state government, but just knowing I was working for the government, I didn't think I was gonna be able to pay off a lot. However, over time, I have gotten several pay raises, a couple promotions. So I used that extra money that I got paid and went ahead and put those towards my student loans. So when I got a promotion, especially through the CPA, that was like my biggest promotion. I got a lot of extra money each month in my paycheck. So I would just put that away to student loans, put it in my savings, and then empty it out that way. I try not to see my pay raises as me actually getting extra money. I just put them off paying off my debt. And I'm still doing that today. Even though I've paid off my student loans, I still owe about $8,000 on my car. So I'm trying to pay it off, and then I'll be completely debt free. And then I may end up buying a house one of these days and owe like $200,000. We'll see. This person said an analysis of how much interest you saved or due to COVID would be interesting to know. So that's what we have over here on this spreadsheet. But basically I took all the interest rates for each of my loans, then I took how much I borrowed. And so I took a kind of the average interest rate of all my loans, but I needed to do a weighted average because some loans weren't that much money and some were more. So the weighted average was just over 4%. And I made $16,800 of payments since the student loan interest has been deferred with the federal government. So I made almost $17,000 of payments that were not accruing interest that would have been if it was before COVID. So I used this student loan repayment calculator that I found on this website called Smart Asset, which I thought was such a clever website. But anyway, used it to calculate how much my interest would have been if it wasn't deferred this whole time. So it would have accrued up to $17.5 thousand, and I only had to pay $16.8. So it's a difference of about $730 that I saved from making the payments while we're not accruing interest. And this person asked, when were you first approached about student loans and what were you told about them? So that's kind of an interesting question. I wasn't approached. It was me wanting to go to college, and I need to borrow money to go to college because I don't come from a wealthy family. So when I filled out the FAFSA, it tells you the limits that you can borrow, and I would definitely recommend you not max out your limit because that is so much money. Also, the government knows that you cannot file bankruptcy on student loans. It's like the only debt that you can't file bankruptcy for. So the government knows they're getting their money back whether you die and your kids pay it or whatever. So they're gonna grant you as much money as they can, and then you sign up for it, and then you have to pay them all this money in interest as well. The fact that student loan servicers are making profit off of people borrowing money for higher education, I will never be able to fathom. It's just not right whatsoever because you are gonna get your money back. There's no need to make profit on that. Nobody's filing bankruptcy for student loans. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. So as far as what I was told about student loans, basically that the interest snowballs and not to borrow any and to go to a cheap college, to live at home, to have a job, just do anything you can to not have to borrow a lot of money. It was my choice to go off to college. I did not want to live at home for college for many reasons. So I went off and did my own thing, and I'm so thankful and blessed and just so thankful that I was able to pay them off in 5 years. So I apologize if this video was all over the place, but I really hope you guys learned something from it. If you have any questions about student loans, you can ask me, but I am not like a professional on student loans. I have just learned a lot of this on my own through my my own personal experience. But I can try to answer any questions you guys have. You can comment below, or you can email me at heavensaudventure@gmail.com. I wish you guys all the best of luck paying off your student loans. Try to avoid them at all costs if you can. Don't be tempted into borrowing more money than you need. Borrow less than you need, so you have to go out and get a job and pay for the difference that you need, because that's what I did. And there were times I was working so much and I didn't sleep, but I'm thankful for it now because I made it through, got a good job, and I was able to pay them off. Really, truly, only through the grace of God that I was able to do this. Like, He has blessed me abundantly, and that is why I'm here today, being able to say that I paid off my student loans. I am beyond blessed. I don't deserve it, and I am so thankful. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will catch you guys next time. Bye, friends.